Welcome to this week's episode, or the next episode, of Nell's Epic Business Show. And on this episode, we have the magnificent Gareth Norgate from GP Norgate. I always get this wrong. Gareth, help me out here. Norgate.
Just GP Norgate.
Are you quite happy with just
GP Norgate? Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Welcome to this episode.
Yeah. Hello.
Good start. Hello.
Yeah.
So, Gareth, quickly to start us off with, as we always do, introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Yep. Hello. My name's Gareth from GP Norgate. Business is split into two parts, which is why you've kind of started there, because you've got GP Norgate Financial Solutions and GP Norgate Estate Planning. So GP Norgate is fine. I give advice on mortgages, equity release, and estate planning type stuff. So long-term care planning, wills, lasting power of attorney, trusts, long-term care planning, that type of stuff, basically.
Okay.
For want of a better word, later life advice is kind of where my speciality lies.
I love that one. How long have you been in business?
Yeah, wow. So I've been in business for, so I suppose officially for 15 years, officially. Okay. Yeah.
Now, there's a reason, and I'll pick this up because obviously I know about this, but I guess you're hesitating because as GP Norgate, you've not been in business for that length of time, but you've had a business before the current one.
Yeah. Well, that's no. The reason I kind of hesitate there is because, well, so yeah, working for myself in one way, shape, or form, in what you would call sort of, I guess, self-employed, limited company, that type of stuff. That's 15 years, but. You know, before that, and I've been thinking about this because I kind of knew you were going to ask this type of question, and before that, before I ever wanted to give advice on mortgages, the estate planning, that type of stuff, the plan was to be a rock and roll star. I was a failed rock and roll star, and that, when I thought about it, that involved essentially working for myself. The band, the band that we had, we had day jobs, and we'd go out and gig, and we self-funded for a period of time our own recording. So, and any money we made, we reinvested into the band so that we could then record future releases. So it was when I thought about that, I was like, actually, prior to working for myself, being in business, I was actually working for myself for a long time prior to that.
As a rock star.
Yeah, as a rock star.
You are the first rock star that's been on these sessions. So
Failed rock star.
Well, you say that though. I guess what class? Oh, and you see now I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Why would you say failed?
Well, because nobody knows who I am. Surely the premise of being a rock star is that you should, be instantly recognizable.
Oh, okay. So the success of a rock star is qualified by how much you get harassed on the street.
Absolutely, nothing to do with talent.
Okay, fabulous. We might circle back to that. Who knows? So talk me through why you decided to start your own business instead of working for someone else.
I kind of sort of eased into it, really. I mean, it wasn't a lightning bulb moment for me. I was working at another job, and I got approached about. So I was working basically at a local authority, and I ended up being approached by another business to say, we're looking for mortgage advisors. So I started out as mortgage advisor, and I started studying towards that. And so then actually I sort of split my time a bit between sort of working at local authority and then and doing the mortgage advising, as it were. And that was self-employed, but via another practice. And then that got more and more successful. And I realised that I could do better over here than I could over there. So for me, it wasn't really a light bulb moment of going, right, I'm gonna go work for myself. It kind of slowly progressed that way over time.
Interesting. I love that one. Now, how would you, over these last 15 years, I'll exclude the failed rock stardom out of that, but in these last 15 years, how would how would you describe your journey so far in like one word or in a very short sentence?
Emotional.
Oh, tell me more. Why that word?
Well, it's there's just lots of ups and downs with it. I've made a lot of mistakes, and you have to, in fact, the biggest sort of learning from the whole thing is around that, is about actually taking responsibility for any mistakes you make, learning from them, addressing it and moving forward, accepting actually that some of the stuff that happens you can't control, but actually what you can control is how you react to that. So then working on that type of stuff. So it's been, there's been some great highs and some low lows. So it's been emotional.
I feel like we need to delve into this a little bit. So share with us, what have been some of those lows? Like, what have been some of those key things that have gone wrong where you go, oh gosh, I've really had to learn from that?
So the business that sort of I had prior to, so after being a sole trader as a mortgage advisor, I then sort of the credit crunch happened, and I'd gone into business with a business partner, and we kind of grew this business that got quite big quite quickly, and it got bigger than we really anticipated, and there was, we had to manage teams. The team grew that we had to manage, and because of the nature of what we did, there was a lot of liability with that business that came with things like directors' guarantees, which then had a big implication for my personal life, and that business ultimately ended up failing. And when you look back, so when I look back at that, and that the failure of that business had a lot to do with circumstance, really. We had a very large introducer that pulled the introduced business, and we were aware of that, and we tried to grow beyond the loss of that business, the loss of those introductions, and we couldn't grow quick enough. So it's the natural reaction in that kind of scenario is to say, well, it's not my fault, I'm a victim of circumstance. But in actual, and that's sort of like the default human position, is to protect yourself, say it's not my fault. But in actual facts, and that's why I talk about like the reaction to the stuff that has happened. What I then had to do is say, okay, all right, some of that stuff I couldn't control, but you've now got to sort out this issue. So you have to control the way that you've reacted to it. And it was my biggest, probably the biggest mistake that I actually made was my own naivety, not understanding enough about business at that time. We grew too quickly. Something like a business coach, for example, back then would have
come in handy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because it would have been a sounding board other than me and my business partner who made these decisions, some of which were great decisions, some of which were terrible decisions, and it would have been somebody else to bounce those ideas off and say, hang on a minute, what about this? What about this? And we didn't. We just kind of went into it all guns blazing, and it didn't work. So then I then had to look at what I wanted out of a business as a result of that, really. One of the knock-on effects of that business, I mean, there's so much stuff that happened around that time. We specialized in pure protection contracts, which were life insurance contracts which have a clawbackable commission,
right.
And that was the problem. And so one of our introducers pulled it. It was Money Supermarket, basically, and they took it all in house. We had to then, so to give you an idea of the size of our clawback commission, it was £10,000 a week at its height. Yeah, so wow. just to stand still, we had to make that type of money. and so we diversified massively. We went into estate planning, and we became one of the sort of first will writers on Groupon, which sounds great. It brought in a whole load of business, but it was a budget proposition, and that kind of led me to where I am now, really, because I've realised that I didn't necessarily want to offer a budget proposition. That wasn't for me, and that was the death knell of me being involved in that spin-off business that came off the back of it.
Yeah. And actually, I was just going to ask, what now looking back on that, because I can imagine that the learnings at the time, there will have been some pretty quick where you had realizations of, gosh, this is something we could have done differently. But now you look back on that quite a few years later, what would you say now are sort of the key learnings from that situation then?
So just do your due diligence on stuff that you're, think and double check everything, every kind of agreement you're entering into. Always think of the worst case scenario and plan for that, and plan for it before you've started the new venture. So I think
before you've signed on the dotted line.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the worst thing that could happen here, and and plan for that, basically. I mean, for example, we were too reliant. So at the height of that business, we were too reliant on one source of business coming in, essentially one lead supplier, really. We were too reliant on one lead supplier, and in addition to that, we were reliant on one form of business as well. But and what became apparent is if we diversified and went into sort of these different areas, then if a client had more than one product with us, that they were more likely to stay with us. And we realized that, I don't know that we did realize it too late, but we didn't do enough about it quick enough, essentially, with all that stuff.
Now, one of the things that you said earlier that I kind of want to circle back around to is you can't always control everything that happens, but you can control how you react to it.
Yeah. What
are some of your key learnings that with the previous business to where you are now? What are you doing differently?
So, I mean, and don't get me wrong, some of that I now carry as a result of I'm still not perfect because as a result of that experience, I'm probably too cautious in what I do now. So I'm very much a control freak now. A good example is at the height of that business, it employed about 20 people, and I'm a bit stubborn and a bit forthright. So I made this promise that I'd never employ anyone ever again. And I'm regretting that really, because it puts a kind of lot of pressure on you. I'm a bit of a control freak anyway, and so I still have sort of issues that are a result of that. So I'm by no means the kind of finished article, and that's kind of what I'm working on now, really, is letting go to a degree. I'm now working on the problems that are a result of the problems from the problems. Yeah.
So it's a knock-on effect, I guess.
Yeah, sorry. And I don't think I've answered the question. What was the question?
The question was, when you said earlier around, you can't control everything around you, but you can control how you react to that. But actually, I guess you have to a certain extent, because your reaction now is still kind of a reaction from what happened then. But what are you doing differently now? Because you know that it's not necessarily what you can't control, it's more how you react to it.
Yeah, it's taking a step back. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, I do a lot of work on myself now, which I never did at all. I mean, and that's not necessarily, in fact, that's not really business from a business side, to be honest with you. A lot of the sort of work I do now is actually on me, really, to a degree, and how I do react to stuff. So I do read a lot of books, and it's all around kind of mistakes and that type of stuff. And in fact, that kind of quote, you can't control everything, but what you can control is how you react to it. That's from High Performance, the book that I've just read. High Performance is somebody clever said that in that book, and I was like, that is so true. So I kind of do a lot of that. Listen to podcasts, listen or read books. Black Box Thinking was another book that really informed kind of how you should view your mistakes, how you should view mistakes, and how you need to look at what's happened. So if something goes wrong, first of all, you need to recognize that it's gone wrong. You then need to actually look at why it's gone wrong. You need to be in an environment where you can admit it's gone wrong and admit it to others. And if you work for yourself, you've got to be honest with yourself and say, actually, right, let's look at what I did there. Let's have a look at if any of those anything that's happened, what has gone wrong, are my mistakes, and whether knowingly or unknowingly, and then how do I put a system in place moving forward that means that doesn't happen again. And so you have to be you have to be open and honest with yourself and look at your past mistakes and see if you are in any way, shape responsible for that, and then work on that. But primarily, the hardest bit about that is being in an environment where you can admit to those mistakes.
And that's a great one. And I was just going to ask, so how do you do that whilst you are working for yourself, by yourself? Like how and where does that accountability come in? Who is the person that you admit to? How easy is it for you as a business owner to still go down that line of actually it's someone else's fault? How do you pull yourself up on that?
Just brutal honesty. I mean, the bonus I've got, I suppose, is my past. So the stuff that's happened to me in the past has shown me, if I'm not brutally honest with myself, what could happen, the implications of it. So it still is a natural self-preservation thing to say, okay, well, that's not my fault. So you have to objectively take a step back and say, right, now, hang on a minute, let's look at this. Is there anything that I could have done better? And then that's only half of it. Then you have to build in a process that means, because you're only human, and it could be that you miss something, but even if you've missed something, it's still, you've missed it and it's still your fault. So you need to put in a process that kind of takes that decision, or not decision, but puts in a process that means it doesn't happen again, I suppose.
Interesting. My next question really I want to ask is, what does success look like to you? But actually, and that's why I hesitated for a second, because I'd almost want to ask, how would you say that success looks differently now, if you think about the business and where you are now, than what you thought when you first started your first business? Has that changed?
Absolutely. I was going to take over the world.
Okay.
Yeah, I was, going to take over the world. Absolutely don't want that. Happy in my lane now. To have no particular want to grow, but not massively. So I've touched upon the trying not to employ anyone. That does limit growing somewhat. Mm-hmm. So for me, so actually, I suppose to answer your question, what success looks like for me is giving a first-class service, doing what I said I would do. It's that type of stuff, as opposed to sort of, whereas before that absolutely, well, I mean, it was, but I was giving lip service to it, I think, really.
Okay.
And it was about growth and that type of thing. Whereas now I'm much more cautious, and it does look totally different. It's a really, I thought you might ask, what does success look like? And the part of something that I've got to work on myself is understanding actually what it does look like, because at the moment I'm not really sure. But what I do know is what success doesn't look like to me.
So what does it not look like? Well,
it's that faceless kind of beast of an organization. It's what I was trying to do and did to a degree previously. It's a business that has grown, and ultimately has volume, but as a result of that volume, potentially loses some of that personalized service.
Now, would you say that, because I feel like we're from one extreme to the next here. So the big faceless organization, and then the I don't want to grow too big.
Yeah.
Who says that it needs to be either, you know, or at this stage?
Yeah, that goes back to the stuff I need to work on myself, really. And that goes back to the control, really, and the fact that, you know, you have to have to grow. If you then do start employing people, you have to trust those people. And that all those issues are my issues, basically, and they're issues that I need to and will continue to work on. They're just not quite there with it yet.
Not there just yet. And I guess my next thought instantly is, so how, for me, this goes back to, why are you running a business? Like, what extra value is this adding to your life?
Yeah, well, the extra value I've got, I mean, for starters, I've been doing it so long. I like the challenge. I mean, I love the challenge of it. I mean, and in fact, that's probably an issue of mine when it gets kind of, you know, I've reinvented myself so many times that it then gets to a level that's successful, and I go, oh, let's invent something else to do. And so I mean, I really do love that challenge. I like as I've alluded to there, I love the control.
No.
That's really? That's probably the key. That I love the flexibility of it. That said, I mean, I do tend to work too much as a result, because I'm a bit of a workaholic in that regard. So I mean, it's all that stuff that I love about it, but the biggest thing probably is the challenge. Absolutely love the challenge of running a business.
Interesting, that, isn't it?
The chase, isn't it?
The chase. Yeah. It's just the hunt, isn't it? That's more important, really, than I guess the catch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that. In your opinion, what kind of behavior traits do you think make a great business owner?
Probably none of them.
Okay.
That's a good question. There's so many. You have to be able to adapt quickly. I think there's so, you know, you can, particularly when you're kind of starting out running a business, there's so much you have to get your head round quickly, and there's not necessarily, unless they've met you, Nell, of course, there's not anybody to guide you to do that. So you've got to figure it out yourself. So I think the key is being a self-starter, is having the curiosity to go, like, how does this work? And then figuring it out yourself, basically. I mean, that is the key. And in fact, when I used to, so if I'd interview people, when I was employing people, that used to be my biggest frustration, which is really unfair on that individual. You know, so it's like, well, why can't you work out yourself? But that's because that's the type of thing I would go, right, how's that work? Right, let's figure out how to do it. And I think that's a common thing amongst business owners, is that curiosity, really. It's like, oh, how's that work? It's a curiosity.
That's an interesting one. That's the first time we've had that. I love that one, actually. What are you most proud of?
I'm gonna get a bit soppy here. It's probably my children, actually.
Oh,
really. Yeah. Did you mean personally, or do you mean business wise?
Well, let's do both. So personal, obviously, the kids.
Well,
that's great. Well, that's helpful.
Yeah, although, you know, not all the time.
If the kids are ever listening to this or watching this,
let's get that in perspective. Not all the time.
Not all the time.
What I'm most proud of is actually is still being here in business now. It would have been very easy for me to just go and get a job on a number of different occasions. You know, I was working for myself in 2008 in the credit crunch, when you know, a 3.5 million pound business went down the pan. It's my bounce back ability I'm really proud of, and what I did, you know, a number of years ago, 3 or 4, 5 years ago, is I completely reinvented myself again for the sort of fourth time. and it's
Gareth version 4.
Yeah, let's hope this one works. Gareth version 4, let's hope this one works.
Bit like phones, isn't it?
Yeah. Upgrade. This is an upgrade.
Yeah, upgraded version. What actually, I'm just going to quickly jump on that bounce back ability, because I think that's an interesting one. Do you do something specific to be able to do that, or is that just something that you've naturally got? What makes you bounce back like that?
I think it's something that is, to a degree, is naturally within me anyway. And it's, yeah, I mean, I go back to sort of working on myself a lot, is that it's a stubborn mindedness to say, actually, no, I can do this and I can do it better this time and this time. Yeah, you know, and it is learning from all that stuff to make you a better person, a better business owner. Yeah, really. So working on yourself, you got. I think there's a bit of it in you anyway, and then you've got to work on it.
I love that. It's a really great one. Now, actually, and it's a question that I've been asking everybody, because the answers of this have really intrigued me, I have to admit, and especially in your case, because you've got young kids as well. What kind of things what kind of subjects did you study at school that are really helping you as a business owner right now? And sort of a sub question to that is, what do you think that they should teach kids in school right now that will help the future generation of business owners?
Yeah, school was a long time ago.
It's not that long, Gareth.
It's quite a while ago. I mean, I can. What did they teach me that helped at school? Do you know what? I don't know that they really did.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's school's theory, isn't it? And I remember, I mean, on a number of occasions, I remember thinking, this is not going to help me later in life. actually at school, particularly around maths, which is ironic, bearing in mind a lot of what I do now is like, I'm never going to use this type of stuff. And so leading on to your next question, I think that is what they need to teach at school, which is, it is actual life skills, stuff that you are going to use, particularly doing the type of job that I do. It still amazes me now that adults don't have an understanding of how stuff is going to work in this country that they're going to need. Can
you give me an example of that? Like, what do you see in your sort of day-to-day business life?
The biggest one is prepping specifically for later life.
Okay.
And the example I would give is long-term care. So if there's a need for long-term care, we are woefully prepared in this country for that type of stuff. So I used to undertake the financial assessments at local authority for people, for what people would pay towards that care. And when I did that as a job, I did it. So that's over 15 years ago now. It's a long time ago. And I still know people who do that job, and I still speak to those people, and I give advice to people around that stuff, and nothing's changed in it. And it was broken back then, that system. And I used to speak to people. So mainly the children, actually, of elderly people who were in need of care in one way, shape, or form. And it's better now to a degree, the education. But I used to speak to people, and they used to say, "What do you mean they've got to pay for their care?" They didn't know that they were going to have to, that mum and dad were going to have to pay for this care, and that there's no need for that. There's no need for that to happen. That's an education thing, and that stuff is out there. So that's an example. That's an extreme example. But things like, mortgages. How does a mortgage work? Most people are going to have a mortgage at some point. They should have a basic understanding of that. How does a loan work? How does interest on a loan work? And not necessarily, and not the maths on it, how to work out the interest, but how is interest applied? The premise, the theory behind it, as opposed to the maths. Whereas at schools, we're very focused on the practicalities as opposed to the premise, I suppose.
Interesting. So are those things that you are kind of teaching your kids, I guess, around the dinner table, because you see that this is not happening in schools? Or they're too young for that, maybe. Those kind of details are a bit too young, maybe.
Yeah, they are possible. I mean, certainly my son's 11, and he's got a very curious nature. And so I am actually starting to have that. And weirdly, he really likes money for an 11-year-old. Yeah, obsessed with it. Like, we'll say, "Were you going to pay me for that?" Things like that. It's woo.
Love it.
Yeah. So I am now starting to have those types of conversations with him. Yeah, because I really do think it's important. And people assume that children can't understand it, shouldn't understand it, or won't understand it, and that's I don't buy into any of that. I don't think we give children enough credit, really.
Love that. Interesting. Kind of final question before we go into the sort of the 3 fire questions that I always ask everybody. If you had a magic wand and there's one thing that you could change about your business right now, what would that be?
That's a great question. What would it be? It goes back probably to the control element that I've got. So as weird as it sounds, it would be me, which I am working on. But yeah, the problem in my business it absolutely is me, and it's those. And it goes back to those control things. I mean, it's at a level now where I need to be trusting others with certain responsibilities. And at the moment, I'm not. And that is holding me back, basically.
And every time you've spoken about this, in the back of my head, I've got this particular Disney song going off that's now going to haunt me for the rest of the day. So thank you very much for that. But you know which one I'm talking about, I'm sure. It has something to do with ice and lots of snow.
Gotcha,
and there's a snowman in it as well.
Yeah. Well, it's easier said than done now. It's easier said than done.
Well, doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yep, that is true. And it will be done. It's just taking a while.
Yeah. Okay. Let me finish off with the 3 sort of quick firing questions that I've been asking everybody so far. Quite intriguing. But what would you tell 10-year-old Gareth?
I would say, believe in yourself.
Nice.
Simple as that, really.
The next question is actually an interesting one, because normally I would say, if you had the chance to start again, but knowing what you know now, but technically you're already there. But even then, on version 2, so when we do this for version 3, if you had to start again knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
It's similar, actually. It's believe in yourself. So it's
you can answer that same.
Yeah, it's the same for them. Yeah, don't bother asking the next one.
Okay.
A lot of the mistakes that I've made previously were ultimately, when I've analysed them and drilled them down, it was lack of confidence. In actual fact, when I look at and that lack of confidence in me really was unfounded. So ask the next question. It's going to be believe in yourself. It's not, no.
It's not. Well, it might be. I don't
it might be. Yeah.
The last question is simply, what's the best bit of advice that you've received? Could be life or business, or both.
The best bit of advice I've received. Not sure. I mean, the thing that I'm going back to at the moment is that quote that I keep saying, which is, you can't control everything. I mean, that was when I heard that in that book, because it was the high performance book that is of all the. I wish I could remember who said it, but there was a real light bulb moment for me, which is, so you can't, although you cannot control everything that happens to you, what you certainly can control is how you react to them. So although that wasn't given to me, that's something that I've particularly recently that's really, really resonated with me. Other than that, advice has been rubbish.
Believe in yourself. I thought
yes.
you were going to
yes,
repeat
and
it
and believe in yourself. Yeah. which was the older me coming back to speak to me when I was 10. Said that. Yeah.
See, you could quite easily do this.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Gareth, I have absolutely loved this. There's some really lovely gems in there. And I'm sure anyone listening or watching this will have definitely taken away a couple of learnings from this. So thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
That's it for this week's episode. So we look forward to seeing you again for another episode of the Epic Business Show. Until then, be epic.